basically the extent to which communities have strong concerns about issues that affect children, see work to support vulnerable children as their own responsibility, and engage in self-motivated action to improve children's life. So basically having action to agency to initiate change, participating all together, and making decisions to protect children based on their strengths. We can go to the next slide, please. Some key messages around this, and basically these are reflections that we have gathered towards our practice, but also towards our individual and collective reflections. We want, we want to acknowledge that communities are local actors too, with agency to drive change. We want to promote the inclusion of communities as key actors in localization from a programmatic perspective. We can go to the next slide, please. We also want to recognize that communities are already protecting children and have walked a path to develop self-organized actions to promote child protection. We want to also shift decision-making powers to communities in CP for collective action, and this is mainly for prevention approaches. We trust communities to lead in protecting children because we acknowledge that they historically have been doing things, and that their history does not begin when we arrive to a community that's in a crisis, that's surviving a crisis. Also to take a strengths-based approach rather than a deficit-based approach. And we want to promote reflection to strengthen institutional learning and change mindsets, and this is mainly from within, to remove the barriers that limit the promotion of community ownership. So basically, this means that we want to shift from an expert-led approach to a facilitation approach, and this is very much linked to the background paper of this meeting of supporting child protection from the ground up. We can go to the next slide, please. So this is our collective pathway here, and basically this is just to say that true change in community-led and for promoting community ownership in child protection begins within. To shift child protection programming in a meaningful way, we must first reflect honestly on our own assumptions, roles, and ways of working. And this goes from the way that we see communities, the way that we understand communities, to the way that we approach them, and ensuring that there's constant reflection when we are approaching them. And this means always asking the question, who is taking the decisions in our program? Who owns the program? And if the answer is our organization or our agency, we are maybe not promoting the community ownership that we want to achieve. We can go to the next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of an introduction of our experience for practice and research, this session has been co-organized by many organizations, War Child, Child Fund, and Save the Children. War Child and Save the Children have a community-led approach called SEEDS. We are on the process of evaluating the effectiveness of this approach in Colombia during this year. And together with Child Fund, Child Fund has a very interesting community-led mapping of child protection risks, which inform the program, and we have conducted one in Ecuador and Colombia as well in the border. We can go to the next slide, please. So just as a last point, because I'm also running out of time and I don't want to take time from the discussion, we think there's an added value in times of community-led child protection and promoting shifting power to communities in child protection. In these times of a humanitarian reset, we think shifting power to communities is key. This means always asking the question, who holds the power to take decision? If the decisions if the action doesn't come from a community, it's not a community led approach. We think that in this way we can reimagine the sector based on good practice and evidence. As I said, we're generating evidence around community-led CP and around community ownership. And we want to mainly learn how community ownership is promoted through these kind of approaches, how sustainable this is, and also understand how cost-effective this is, but also understanding the impact, which we will learn through a rigorous evaluation. Yeah, this means that we will collectively work towards achieving change, prevention of violence, and communities as agents that drive change. We will see communities as active actors if we promote these kind of approaches. And of course, and this cannot be taken out, we want to promote the connection of systems for sustainability. So informal community systems and formal systems are key that we can articulate those for sustainability, but the communities need to be in the driver's seat and need to identify those systems. We can go to the next slide, please. Just the last message from the communities, something that we have heard and that we wanted to share. This is from one case study that we did in a refugee setting in Colombia. This is one person from the community, a young person. Now there is greater interest in community issues. Before, they didn't give their opinion. Now they propose things and say what they think. Among the mothers, they are exchanging to teach something to the children and teenagers per week. This shows a bit how participative and how sustainable this can be. I'll give the floor to Michael to introduce our great panelists and the discussion.
Thank you very much, Juan, José. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Boampong, and I'm the Senior Youth Advisor at Child Fund International. First of all, would like to thank everyone for joining this important conversation on community-led child protection in humanitarian settings. At this point, we will hear from some inspiring leaders working across regions to shift power to communities and young people, and I'm excited to moderate this panel. So feel free to share your comments and your questions in the chat, and we will do our best to address them during the discussion. So we'll move on to some introductions. First of all, we have Connolly Butterfield, who is the Senior Program Manager for Protection at Interaction, leading humanitarian efforts aimed at achieving meaningful protection outcomes. And Connolly is very much dedicated to strengthening protection systems to better serve people affected in crisis. Next, we also have Atsu David, who is the Regional Co-Director for Africa at the Global Fund for Children, where she champions community-led approaches and youth empowerment, supporting organizations to center young people as co-creators and leaders in shaping sustainable change. And of course, we can't, be talking about young people without having young people here, to hear their voices. So we do have Ranulu Keshan Darashenge, who is also a youth advocate and the founder of Ideal Hub in Sri Lanka. He's very much actively leading community initiatives in child protection and civic engagement and digital inclusion, while contributing to national and regional advocacy through Child Fund and IVEC. And IVEC stands for Alliance of Youth to End Violence Against Children. Keshan is unable to, join us live for this panel, but due to some constraints. But we do have a brilliant video that we are going to, show to highlight his perspectives. So we'll dive straight into the discussion. First of all, I'm going to go to Connolly. Connolly, you have over a decade of experience in protection programming, and now you're leading Interaction's action-based research on conflict-induced food security and protection. Can you share how community engagement influenced the design of your programs, specifically if you can focus on the role of community engagement within the food security initiative.
Great. Thanks so much, Michael. It's such a pleasure to be on the panel today and to be speaking with all of you. And I'm sure you're wondering why talking about food security we're in a child protection setting. But I will get into that. So as Michael said, I'm with Interaction. And if any of you are familiar with Interaction, you might, again, be a little surprised to see us here. We're not an operational agency, and we're actually not even a child protection agency. But what we do champion is the centrality of protection. So how can operational agencies think about not just meeting basic needs and delivering humanitarian assistance, but actively reducing protection risks. And right now we're doing a pilot to kind of research what are the best ways for humanitarians to consider risk reduction and contributing to protection outcomes in their work. And we call that our action-based research project. And one space we're looking at that is in Colombia. And we're right now partnering with several INGOs and LNGOs in an area of Colombia called Quibdó. And the way we frame our approach, it's a little different than the way most humanitarians, I think, approach their programming. We start not just with a needs assessment. I'm sure everybody's familiar with your kind of traditional project cycle management. You go in, you do your needs assessment, you plan your response, you do your response, and hopefully at each of those stages you already have some elements of participation. But in our approach, which we call results-based protection, you actually go in and you do more of a protection risk analysis with the community. So it's not about what needs do you have, it's about how do you experience issues. So we are looking at conflict-induced food insecurity and the connection between food insecurity and protection. So we went to this community and said, how do you experience food insecurity? How do you experience conflict? What do you see as the connection between those two? And then we worked with the community to sort of prioritize what risk stood out to them the most when they thought about food insecurity. And in that area, they defined it as confinement, which again, normally humanitarians understand as an armed actor kind of imposing restrictions on freedom of movement through the use of violence. And so he said, okay, so you're confined communities, you don't have freedom of movement, and that's restricting your ability to get your traditional foodstuffs, that's restricting your market access, and it's kind of impeding your ability to govern yourselves and negotiate collectively as communities with armed groups. Okay, cool. We designed a whole theory of change around this. We felt really good about ourselves. We did this really participatory approach, had this great theory of change in this plan of action. So in this validation step, and again, some of our partners, I think, were a little skeptical of this step. They said, look, we're not new to this community. We've been working with these communities for ages. So we already know, we've done our participatory needs analysis. We know the risks. We have this great project designed. Let's just find donors. And we said, no, we have to do the step that we call validation, where you actively take your plan of action back to the communities. And essentially it's just, as it's called validation, it's a double check with communities. Does this make sense to you? And I think it really speaks to what Juan was saying in his introduction to the panel, that communities, even the ones we know well, can really surprise us. So when initially we collected community leaders from Afro-Colombian and indigenous communities to share our plan of action with them, to share our theory of change, and they said, yeah, this sounds great, but you know what you don't understand about our experience of confinement? You humanitarians look at confinement as something that happens, it's happening now. It's this overt use of violence to stop us from moving. And realistically for us, confinement's been happening for 30 years. Armed groups don't even almost have to use violence anymore because the invisible barriers that they've created are so well established. Sometimes we don't even try to cross them. So the way you define confinement doesn't speak to us, and it's not about the imposition of violence right now. It's about the degradation of our cultural identity. And so we're not so much worried about, a trader getting to market. What it really means, and our true experience of confinement right now, is actually as a child protection risk, because children and adolescents in our community don't know what it means to be from this community, to be an Afro-Colombian here, to be an indigenous community leader. So they're just joining the armed groups. And it's, again, it's not like forced recruitment in that they're being coerced into joining a group, but armed groups have so eroded our sense of identity that children are just seeing no other path forward. And so all of our kids, it's a pipeline straight into the armed groups, and then that further erodes who we are as a community. So the thing about confinement and this sort of continuous confinement, it's not about the food security. It's about the children and their future and their forced recruitment. And so we went, whoa, we completely missed that because we'd come in with community governance actors and conflict prevention actors and yes, food security actors and market analytics, and had totally missed the child protection angle. And so it was from the community leaders being like, whoa, 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 you've missed the key point of our experience of this protection risk, that we reworked it. And the community leaders also said to us, look, it's great that you have us here as community leaders and even youth leaders, but we're just a group of people. What you really need are the voice of the community. So they even asked to do a second level of validation where we reframed our risk analysis with them and reframed our theory of change with them. And then they went back to their communities with members of our team and did this second level of validation to again speak to parents, to speak to youth leaders, to speak to at-risk youth who were already thinking about joining our groups, to say, what would change your experience of confinement to help you become better linked to the community, to help you better feel like you have a future outside of the armed group? So through our community engagement, we really changed what was supposed to be a food security project into a child protection project. And it was the multiple rounds of engagement with the community to not only assess the risk and prioritize the risk, but really to frame it in a way that made the most sense for the community. So even if you're not habituated into a lot of community engagement, even if your actual intervention might not have the best level of community ownership, you could always make sure your interventions are really community-led by just constantly, iteratively connecting with those communities in how you understand and design your program. And don't just assume because your organization has been there for ages,
Okay.
you're going to know what's best.
Yeah, Connolly, I think you have a very great, perspective on this. And I do like the idea of, having to check, repeatedly with, community leaders to validate what we are doing. So we're going to move on to Ame. Ame, as the Regional Director for Africa at the Global Fund for Children, and knowing that you are a strong advocate for community-led and youth-centered approaches, how do you envision the impact of funding community-led child protection initiatives, and what kind of transformative change are you seeing or aiming to support when children and youth are positioned as co-creators and decision makers?
Thank you, Michael. So I will probably just go and give some practical example of how we see the impact of the community-led approach. So we support community-based organizations, and currently in West Africa, we are supporting four organizations in 4 countries. But I'll talk about Sierra Leone, that we have supported, where we supported community-based organization to review the way they do their community-led approach. So when we met them, they told us that they will go to the community, they will take food there, and then they will tell them, we are coming to tell you about female genital cutting this day. And usually people will not come, and they will give them transportation. And people will not come, or after all the efforts, they don't see any result. So we started thinking as a founder, how do we really support true community-led approach? And we found Tostan that has about 30 years of experience and proven results of how to do real community-led approach. So we went to learn from Tostan. And then when we came back with the partners and the funders, as a funder, we learn along with our partners. And then when we came back, we worked with our partners to experiment, not to do everything, but just to experiment. And the experimentation was what? Apply the principles. don't go to the communities with solutions already made. Go to them and then play the role of a facilitator. You are there to facilitate and not to impose anything. They know their issues, they can reflect, help them to reflect. And that's what happened. So when they changed the approach, they went to the communities and then asked the communities, can we have a discussion with you? Would like to support you. But can you call everybody, the children, the women, the youth, the religious leaders, everybody came together. And then they led a process of helping them to reflect on what do you want for your well-being. And it's important to center well-being, not a particular project, but a well-being of the community. So they reflected and they came up with their priorities, what they wanted to achieve. But you won't believe that after a while, because of that approach where they put them at the center, the communities decided to build schools. They realized that, especially secondary schools, where there were no school and their children were going very far to attend school in town. But they found out that the children were subject to rape and different accidents. And then they decided that we should do something about it. They went, they decided to build their own school. And then they said, okay, we don't have all the support, but we can go and find the support ourselves. So we don't come in, or our partners don't come in like the almighty gods providing all the solutions, but they recognize the power that the community has to change its own issues that are affecting them and work for everyone's well-being, how they value women's health, how they value children's health. And amazingly, they started doing a lot of things that we were surprised to see in such a short time, where the men are saying we are no more violent towards our women, we respect them. The parents are saying we sit down with our children to study with them to make sure that they are going to school and they succeed in school. We make sure we value women, we value girls. And then they go themselves to the Ministry of Education to ask for support. So where they have started building school, they ask the ministry to send teachers for them. And we have seen also how education has improved. They now have children who are doing very well at school. They are protecting their children all the time and because they have understood. So our role is just to help them reflect on what they want for their well-being, but not impose. But maybe what happens is that when we come with already made solutions, thinking it's about us, it's about funding. And I want to share here, it's not about funding. It's about supporting the communities to find its own solutions. And in Africa, we usually say we are poor. Our communities are not poor. They have everything. They grow the best fruits. It's very sweet pineapples and all that. They have everything. But we just need to believe that when we go there, we are not to provide solution. They have solution. They just need someone to guide them into reflecting about how they work together to achieve their well-being. So this is how we see. What we want to see is communities where they take their own actions, not because somebody came to tell them, but because they have realized that working for their well-being is important and they gain from it. So I will stop here. And if there are other questions, I can share later on. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Amen. Great reminder about our position as, facilitators, having to guide communities. So as I mentioned earlier on, we do acknowledge that, we cannot be talking about young people or children without their own participation and involvement. And we do have a video from one youth leader from Sri Lanka, which responds to how young people are leading child protection actions in communities. So without further ado, I would ask our producers to display the video of Keshan, and then from there we would get some, reaction from Ame on that video.
Keshan, how are you leading child protection actions in your community?
Hi, I am Keshan from Hambantala district, Sri Lanka. And I am part of IVAC, the Alliance of Youth to End of Violence Against Children. IVAC started small in 2017. I was just a schoolboy when I first attended training on child rights and leadership. That experience opened my eyes. It made me realize that young people can be powerful voices in protecting child rights. In 2018, with the support of Child Fund, IVAC was officially launched under the theme "Be Human Towards Children." Today we are strong. Today we are a strong, independent movement in more than 3,000 members across all 25 districts of Sri Lanka. In our community, youth are leading child protection effort in many powerful ways. We don't just talk, we act, and we start at the ground level. And also, one of the biggest thing we do is raise awareness. We have organized a campaign on ending corporal punishment in school, run community program on online safety, and even helped draft disaster risk reduce plan of in our villages. These effort being young people, teachers, parents, and even local authorities together to talk about real issues child faces. We have also working directly with service providers this year with support from Child Fund Sri Lanka. We led youth driven child protection services gap analysis across 8 districts. I was one of the youth researchers. We were trained to use a special toolkit that helped us gather real stories and data from children, parents, teachers, and government officers in the community. We collected stories and data insight from 14 division in 8 districts, reaching deeply into the grassroots. We can discuss about what we found was that over 50% children could not name even 3 local child protection officers in the area. Many frontline officers lacked stand qualification or proper job training to handle sensitive child protection issues. Next, service were scattered across ministers with no centralized coordination and training or budgeting. There was no unified data system, meaning sensitive information was often stored manually. Next, monitoring and evaluation mechanism were weak or missing altogether. Yet amid all these gaps, we found hope in dedication of service providers, hope in the communities, hope in the youth. Based on our findings, we made recommendation among them. We can discuss about establish a centralized secure data system to track cases and reduce risks to vulnerable children. Next, creating a coordination per job training program for the child protection officers, pooling budget and responsibilities at the divisional level to avoid duplication and improve services, raising awareness among communities, especially children and families on valuable services and support. Next, mobilizing youth as grassroots accountability leaders, making sure services and services are not just promises but delivered with quality and care. These were not just idea. This came from real conversation from the lived experience of children and families. When we present our finding at the National Forum in March in this year, we were hard. Authorities took our recommendation seriously, and discussion have begun to elegant national effect with grassroots realities. Began part of IVAC has shown me that youth are not just future leaders. We are leaders now. We understand our communities. We speak the language, and we are willing to step up. So when you ask how youth are leaders, child protection effort in our communities, the answer is by being present, by being informed, and being bold enough to act. Thank you.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And, there's a classic case of, how young people themselves are leading child protection action. So as we've just heard from Keshan, they are leading now. And just wanted to, draw on your own experience with the Global Fund for Children on, your reflections, what young people are doing, relating to Sri Lanka and what you are doing in other parts of the world. But before you come in with your, reflections, I just want to remind our participants that if you have any questions, maybe your own struggles with how you are approaching child protection issues in communities, I would like to encourage you to, post your questions or comments in the chat, and we'll try and then accommodate them. So, Ame, the floor is yours.
Thank you. It's really inspiring to hear stories from young people. The young people they are not the future, like it said. It's actually the present, and they want to do a lot of things. And we need to change maybe our perception of children, that they don't know anything. The adults have to do everything for them. And we are seeing it at Global Fund for Children. We are one of those rare organizations that believe in the power of young people. We fund them. We fund child rights organizations. They are age 8 to 18, but they are amazing, the kind of work that they are doing. And we've seen how they are positively influencing using community-led approach. So I'll talk about Children Forum Network in Sierra Leone that we are funding. Is a child-led organization, and it's amazing how they combine school and community work. So recently they are in a cohort with adults, but they refuse to be treated as children. They don't want any preferential, they don't want to be considered as children who don't know. They want all capacity development to be done just like adults. And then they claim we had to give them funding to organize a convening on community-led approach, deepening the community-led approach. You won't believe the kind of work that those young people did. They took us to a community where they are working with, And the community said, they are adults, they are old people, but these young people are teaching them. They are teaching them the right way. We've seen a woman who was doing female genital cutting, but after the young people went there to have sessions with them, she said, I am no more doing that. I am investing in girls' empowerment. And she didn't want anybody to call her, they call it soe, the women who do the cutting. She was categorically, frantically saying, no, I don't want anybody to call me. They brought the community to stop, they had this young men, they call it Poro Society, where they have this secret society where the young men go and they do all kinds of violence around town and all that. It was a culture, but they help the community to reflect if this is good for their well-being, and they stopped it. So young people, it's high time we believe in their potential and their power to bring change and to support them, trust them that they can manage funding. They can do amazing things, and they will see how things will go faster than we think.
Yeah, thank you very much. And just wanted to flag that, the work that Keshan is doing together with the Alliance for Youth Movement in Ending Violence Against Children. Child Fund is also a very strong believer in, young people. We trust them, and, very proud of Keshan and all the contributions that they are making to addressing child protection in their communities. So I haven't seen any question yet, but we still have some time, and I want to get back to our panelists to ask them, if they can tell us about what community ownership means to you in your work. Obviously, community ownership can take different forms across humanitarian and development settings, but what does it mean to you and the work that you are doing? And if you can share some examples to illustrate how this works or plays out in practice. So, community ownership. Thank you. So maybe we start with Butterfield. Connolly, if you would want to share your perspectives on this.
Sure, I'd be delighted. Again, from my perspective, often in humanitarian assistance, everybody's so familiar with like the participation ladder. And so they think that you have to take all of these steps to have community ownership. But again, from our perspective at Interaction and when you're looking at results-based protection, it really has to start from a place that communities understand the work that you're doing and you're responding to a real issue as they perceive it. So obviously we have to do a bunch of things as humanitarians to make sure we're sharing our risks in the right way, and we can say it's a risk of confinement and you compare that across regions. But if the communities don't see your work as contributing meaningfully to their lives, they're not going to feel any ownership over what happens, over how your staff, even if they are from the community, engage and support. So it really comes from a place of what does the community, how do they experience a need or particularly a risk? And then are we responding in a way that really links to their understanding and that they think is going to have an impact? And again, for us as humanitarians, we tend to like to package things. And I know we're in a child protection forum. So just to say, for communities, child protection is not a separate little space, right? It's part of their lives. It's how their children are. And as Ame has been saying, a lot of communities are now by children themselves, by youth and adolescents. And so ownership starts from saying, okay, what does it mean to you? And talking about, for us, food security and child protection, they're not separate, they're one and the same. And so are we kind of trying to conceptualize, yes, we have to package things to develop our expertise and to go in our own models, but when we program, when we think, community ownership means responding to people in a way that they live and not just in a way that we are taught to think as humanitarians, but being organic. And making sure that our programs respond organically to how people live, and are they seeing results? Are we really measuring our impact on communities, not just by the number of workshops we hold, but how is it creating the change that communities want to see? And I think that's really where ownership comes in.
Yeah, thank you very much. So we do have a question here, and I don't know if Ame, you would want to respond to it. The question is, as people are listening to the presentations on results-based assessment to results-based assessment, the approach sounds similar to child and communities by child protection actors. So how would you characterize the differences? I don't know
Sorry,
if
Michael,
maybe.
we lost you for a few minutes, so I didn't get the full question. Can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, so basically, the person is asking, with respect to the results-based assessment, the approach that is being described sounds similar to child protection or multi-risk assessment that are carried out with children and communities by child protection actors. How would you characterize the differences?
Well, we are different organizations working with different aspects, and I've also realized that community-led approach, community child protection, we don't always give it the same meaning, but for us at GFC, it is the communities that do their own, will we call it risk assessment? Their reflection on what they want. So we don't have, as part of the community-led approach, we don't do those risk assessment. The risk is for who? It's actually how do we help them to reflect on issues that are affecting their well-being. Everything is centered on well-being. And it is true that we, as donors, we have our own focus, we know what we want, but at the end of the day, we really need to go by what the communities, what are their priorities. So I think Connolly was saying it, when you go sometimes to the areas where there's conflict, that what you think is their priorities is not always what they think is their priorities. But the only way is to ask them. Maybe that's what we call risk assessment, but we have to maybe redefine what we call risk assessment is for who the risk, and rather focus on what do they want and how do we support them to achieve their well-being. I'm not sure if I responded. Maybe Connolly can also add from the humanitarian perspective.
Yeah, Connolly, if you can, maybe in a minute or two.
Sure, I'll be really quick. So I don't know if this is about results-based protection, which is, I put a lot in the chat too, so you can just read it there. It's a specific approach that Interaction has been working on about operationalizing the centrality of protection. So basically, how can we switch from a humanitarian perspective from just thinking about needs, like let's address needs, to how do we reduce protection risks and achieve protection outcomes? And we focus not just on a risk analysis. So again, how does the community understand risk, but how do we build the right constellation of actors? So maybe it's not just humanitarian INGOs, but are you bringing in civil society organizations and peace building NGOs, and maybe bringing in some development folks? So who, and from different sectors. So again, drawing from food security and governance and child protection to meaningfully reduce, in Colombia, the risk of confinement, you need a bunch of different people. So what is the risk? How do we understand it? Who's necessary to work together to reduce that risk? And we don't just focus on our little project. But then also, when we look at outcome-oriented measurement, to what I was saying recently, it's about how do people experience the outcome. So we're not just measuring our project, what did we deliver, but how did we contribute to a reduction in that risk? So that's the RBP approach. And there's a lot on Interaction's website, and you can reach out to me. I think if you'll have our contact information, happy to talk about it in more than a minute.
Yeah, and obviously, bearing in mind, the role of communities in, proposing what they want for themselves, and not just to focus on the risks, which could be maybe more of a deficit, approach, rather than focusing on the strengths of the community to, propose what they want for themselves. So at this point, we're almost getting to the closing part of our session. But before I hand over to Juan, would say I would like to really thank our panelists. We've all heard today something that reinforces the importance of shifting power to children and communities. And this is very essential to building sustainable and, context-driven child protection system. So thank you all for, this organic conversation, and I'm sure we'll continue to, get this conversation moving. So I'll hand over to Juan José. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Amen. Thank you, Connolly, for a great discussion. I find it so interesting, as Michael said, very organic, and we're all collectively learning. You can see a couple of organizations, the Global Fund for Children, which is a donor, even academics thinking about how we can actually shift power to communities in child protection. I just want to close the session with the key takeaways that we gathered throughout when our participants were speaking, and which was deeply an interesting discussion. First one, and this is one of the first conclusions that we got from our three panelists today, we need to understand child protection risks in the terms of the communities. We cannot impose our language, we cannot impose our ways, and I think it's important, as Amea said through her intervention, we need to understand what the community needs, what the community wants, and what they actually want to do, and not go to the communities with a pre-designed project or thinking that there's these specific risks that we want to work in the communities. We need to allow them to actually understand what is that they want to work with. We need to be open, and I think this is a great conclusion from the discussion. We need to remain open to learn from the communities. We do not know everything. We do not know the histories of the community. We do not know their strengths. So we need to remain open. We need to walk the communities. We need to talk to the people, and we need to allow them to understand what are the risks for children, but what are their own capacities and how they can work towards it. There's an important conclusion and one takeaway that I want to emphasize, and is that in community-led child protection, the communities take the decision and they initiate action. We take a facilitation approach to promote ownership. We work also at the pace of the communities. We do not force our agendas. We do not impose our timelines. And communities are the ones that they go through a participatory process to understand risks, to prioritize what they want to work, to also understand their capacities, but also understand what available services there are, and to develop feasible and participatory action plans. And this means it's not just 1, 2, 3 persons leading an action plan. It means that there's diversification and the community is participating towards child protection. And this is also one important one, and I heard Connolly talking about confinement, and this is important, and as you know, I'm from Colombia. Protracted crises require innovation and collective action with communities. They understand what they are facing, they have a historical memory, they have capacities, and they also have experience working towards similar crises and similar things that have happened to them. And I think from what Connolly was explaining, this understanding of the communities of confinement was clear to understand why child recruitment should be prioritized in such a project, and the way that it should be, that they wanted to work with that. So that was a very important takeaway. Another one, and I think this is a key one, as agencies and as civil society and as international organizations, we are there to facilitate, not to impose. And this means being humble. This means taking time to build trust. This means getting away from our expert shirts role, bests, and really working collectively with communities and really being open to learn from them. Another important one, and this is two key ones from what Kishan talked us through. inclusion is key for community ownership. If we leave children and youth and women out, we cannot truly claim that it's community owned and that it's participatory. Young people, youth, they can lead the way. And as we learned from Kishan, they are already self-organizing, they are already worrying about child protection risks, and they are already taking the lead on this. They do understand their communities, they speak their languages, and they are already taking this leading role. As agencies and international organizations, we need to work collectively and closely with them. And just the last one that I want to share, and that is very important, and I got this from Ame as well, is not about funding, it's about facilitation. We need to always reflect and remember why we are here. We are there at the communities to support social change. We're there at the communities to prevent violence, to respond to violence against children, to try to build sustainable solutions to avoid that this happens again in the future, and durable solutions. So it's not about funding, it's about us facilitating and working closely and collectively with communities. I know it's just some time, so I want to thank again Ame, Michael, Connolly, Keshan, and Atta, who sadly couldn't join. And thank you on behalf of us organizing the sessions, War Child, Save the Children, and Child Fund. Thank you all.